Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to be adding some electronics to the Wildone Blockhead and doing some quick assembly of the body. Last time we centered up the servo and fitted the servo saver, so this week we're on to step 31, fitting the servo, ESC and the radio. Okay, we're going to need two M2x10s, two 3x12 self-tappers, two 3mm washers, two 2mm washers and the rubber switch cover. There is of course the servo and its bits, the ESC, and of course when we get to it, the receiver. First, something we forgot last time, or rather I forgot, we're supposed to pop the steering linkages into the servo saver. They just have Z-bends on the end, so we feed them in through the end holes in the servo saver from the inside. The servo mounts to the raised bit in the chassis. Now there's a slot at each end that need to line up with the servo mounting holes that we fitted to the servo last time. So while holding the servo in position with the linkages going through the holes in the sides of the chassis, we need to flip the chassis over and use the self-tappers with the 3mm washers. For now we do the screws up so they're not quite tight and the servo can slide side to side for adjustment. Next the rod ends pop onto the balls for the steering. And assuming the servo is still centered, we can slide the servo so the steering is as straight and even as we can get it, and then we nip up the screws. Chances are there's going to be a bit of fiddling to do later, setting up the toe mainly, but it'll be close enough to get us going. Another quick bit I missed right at the beginning of the build, we're supposed to cut the bit of the sprue that's in the hole in the middle of the chassis. Mainly because there's a bit that sticks up that's going to get in the way when we try and fit all the electronics in the chassis. When fitting the ESC, before sticking anything down, place it in the chassis and get a feel for where the wires go and the lengths and routing. We need the motor wires to run to the back and we'll need somewhere to tuck the orange wire that only gets used with a brushless motor. When you're happy with it, we can clean up the surfaces with some alcohol to degrease. Now Tamiya do include some servo tape in the kit, but I find if you ever want to remove it, it falls to bits and you're going to be scraping bits off for hours. Instead, I use a Fast Tracks branded tape. I'm sure it's available with different labels too, but the trick is it sticks really well, yet it peels off cleanly if you ever need to remove it later. For the ESC, we need to cut a square of tape and stick it to the bottom. Peel off the backing and press it down right where we want it on the chassis. Switch next, and we need to remove the two screws that attach the cover plate. Now it's worth noting that I'm using a Tamiya ESC, so this is a direct fit, but if you're using a third-party ESC, such as the Carson the kit came with, you'll probably have a different shaped switch that you're going to need to be a bit creative to figure out how to mount. With the plate off the Tamiya switch, we can slide the rubber cover over, offer it up to the chassis and use the two M2 screws and 2mm washers from underneath to fit. Okay, receiver next, and we're using a fairly slim Fly Sky 3 channel, so we can stick it to the bottom of the chassis, partly tucked under the steering servo. Other receivers might have a better place to sit, so before sticking it down, do experiment a bit to see where it wants to go. As usual, we need to clean with some alcohol and cut some tape and stick it down. Now the steering servo plugs into channel 1 and the ESC into channel 2. And other than some tidying up, that's the electronics in. Now if we plug in a battery and bind the receiver, check your radio's manual for instructions there, we should find when it's turned on we have steering. We'll need to set the endpoints and no doubt once running we'll need to fiddle with the trim, but that's for later. If we give the trigger a pull, the motor should run too. Next time you see the chassis, the wiring will have been cleaned up, which involves a couple of zip ties and some careful tucking. Step 32, steering adjustment, which we've already mostly covered, so onto the body. Step 33 and 34 cover trimming and painting, but Tamiya have already done that for us, which is nice. So on to step 35, the spotlights and rear mounts. Okay, we need two M3x6s, two 3x12 self-tappers, four 3mm washers, two black O-rings and two metal body mount plates. Then we have the main bit of the body, 2 yellow spotlights that we assembled right at the beginning of the build, and some aluminium glass tape. Okay, we'll fit the plates first, which just offer up to the inside at the rear of the body, and we use the M3x6s and washers to attach them. Don't do them up super tight just yet. We'll need the body on the chassis to get the positions just right, so we'll nip them up later. The spotlights use the self-tappers, which go up through the holes in the middle of the body. Then we slide on an O-ring and screw it into the base of the light. Now we don't want to do them up tight, we just want to slightly squash the O-ring so it can absorb some impact in crashes. The spotlight should be able to wobble just a little. Fit both, straighten them up, and that's the lights fitted. The last bit of this step is the aluminium tape to reinforce the side of the body. We need to cut a couple of strips to run along the narrow sections on the sides. There's nothing too crazy, we just need the 2 strips which get stuck along the weak point of the body. Nice and simple. Step 36, the driver. Now we need 2 3x8 self-tappers, a 3mm washer, G8 the front of the helmet, G9 the rear of the helmet, and G13 the mounting tab. To assemble, we need the front of the helmet and the mount. Now the narrow end of the mount just slots into the front part. Then we slide the rear part over the wider end of the mount, squeeze it up, and thread in one of the self-tappers from the back. The helmet does need a bit of paint for the face, but for now we'll leave him as is and deal with the details later. There's the helmet, and of course when we get to it, the driver body to paint too. To mount the helmet, we use the other self-tapper with the washer. Poke it through the hole in the neck and screw it into the base of the helmet. Take up the slack, straighten him up, and that's step 36 complete. Step 37, the decals. We need the main bit of the body and roof along with the decal sheet. Now we covered my favourite method for dealing with large decals in the first video, so rather than go over it again, I'll do all the decaling off camera. It will be a lot easier that way. It's just a case of cut the decals out, stick them down as per the manual. It does take a while, but really does make the body look rather good. Right, that seems like a good place to pause for this week. We've got the body largely ready enough for a test assembly at least. Next time we should end up with a running chassis, which will be nice. Anyway, until then, thanks for watching, like if you like, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!